regarding supply chain automation, there's a lot of buzz or noise out there in the marketplace. For those of us in a supply chain related job or occupation, we get bombarded with emails, notifications related to automation. I know I get a lot of them. I did a quick search and found many recent examples of articles related to automation. So just to name a few here, Supply Chain Brain had a recent article that was titled, Building the Business Case for Automation. Automation World had one called How Automation Secures the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain. Another one from Spend Matters, Procurement Automation Helps Streamline Order Processing. That one was about Dell and how they use automation. IDG Connect, Discover How to Connect AP Automation to the Strategic Vision. Modern Materials Handling, Automation, What's Next for Supply Chain Software, and the list goes on. So, all of this automation info can easily lead to information overload or questions. You see all this stuff and you ask yourself, sounds kind of cool. How do I apply these tools or these techniques to my business? Where should I start? So taking a step back, what does supply chain automation mean? What's the definition? Regarding automation, I looked into Automation Federation. They've got a website. They define automation as the creation and application of technology to monitor and control the production and delivery of products and services. Dictionary.com defines it as the technique, method, or system of operating or controlling a process by highly automatic means as by electronic devices, reducing human intervention to a minimum. So in the supply chain management context, automation can be applied across the end-to-end flow of goods, from raw materials to finished goods delivery. It can be applied across all the different functions ranging from design, procurement, planning, manufacturing, transportation, order management, logistics, invoicing, et cetera. The objective is generally to create process efficiency and build out a competitive infrastructure. So the general term supply chain automation covers a very broad range of potential applications. So one question is real-world adoption keeping up with all the buzz? Generally, the answer is no. Research shows that many companies are still maintaining manual processes in a number of their supply chain operations. Some of the reasons, I think just human nature or risk aversion, it's safer to stay with what you know. Sometimes known problems are a little less scary than implementing a new solution that can maybe cause some new problems. Maybe it's the lack of perceived need, fear of a high cost of a new solution, lack of understanding the potential return on investment you might get by automating or implementing a new tool. Sometimes it's just time and resource availability. You're really busy, not sure if you can prioritize and focus on a new project. Sounds good, but gee, I don't have the time. So it could be that there's just so much information out there as well, this buzz, that you're not quite sure where to start. So, is now the right time to explore automation for your business? This slide lists several reasons why now might be a good time for you to take a closer look. One of them is technology is becoming more affordable. There's a lot of technology providers out there developing, marketing their new and better solutions. This good old-fashioned competition helps keep costs low while the product features keep improving. Also, technology advances have enabled many automation opportunities that were not even possible before. For example, some of the new in-memory computing and database technologies from SAP, like SAP HANA, Oracle, and others, they've enabled some ridiculously fast transaction processing speeds to complete very complex transactions. So there's a lot of applications of that you might be able to apply to your business, and those are built in to some of the tools. Flexibility is out there to implement on-premise, or you can implement a cloud or subscription-based tool or service. Often the cloud-based services can lower your upfront costs. Maybe they take less resources from your organization to implement, or they reduce the risk of the implementation. Another point, is your business growing? Do you have the need to expand regionally or globally? If you do, some level of automation might be a great enabler for your expansion. Generally, if you expand geographically, you've got more transaction volume, more complexity. There's a greater number of unique business processes, that you need to support across different geographic areas. If you don't have some level of automation, often it's quite difficult to keep up with the higher volume and the complexity without having a decrease in your transaction accuracy, more manual errors perhaps, problems with customer satisfaction. Another reason now might be a good time to explore is, end of year planning and budgeting time. You've got some budget dollars available to spend now, maybe spend them or you lose them, or maybe you're planning for next year. You want to get a project approved on next year's budget to help you improve your business's competitive position or your profitability. Maybe your existing processes are a bit too slow or they're not flexible enough. Maybe you've got too many people processing manual transactions based on paper documents versus electronic documents. Perhaps you'd like to free up some of your people to work on some other stuff or some more strategic or higher value activities versus spending a lot of their time doing basic transaction processing. Maybe you don't have visibility you want to the status of documents like open POs or inbound shipments, remote inventory balances. Maybe your overall supply chain your cycle time is too slow. You've got manual errors, inaccuracies. If any of these things ring true for you, then maybe now is a good time for you to dig more into supply chain automation. So if you do decide to take the leap, invest in some new technology or new solution to help you automate your supply chain, great. As you know, with any new activity, you need to be aware of the potential challenges and the risks. Being aware of these challenges, it's the first step in making sure you can put together a good plan to execute and avoid the risks. Will all of this slick new automation technology really enable us to get to a completely automated supply chain? The graphic in the lower right of this slide says the answer is maybe one day. The results are from a recent EBN poll, and they were pretty evenly split. 40% of respondents said yes, it would happen. 40% said no, won't happen. And 20% said maybe it'll happen, but it won't be until 2050. I know in general I'm a big supporter of automation. I'm all for it. I think there's always a place to have some human intelligence in the process. It's difficult to effectively automate everything. I know one of my pet peeves, some of the so-called automated customer support phone lines. I'm a customer of United Airlines and Comcast Cable. They both have pretty good automated support lines. Maybe some of you can relate to this as well, but I know I've been caught on those phone lines. It seems like you're in an endless loop trying to get to the process that you want to get to. I know I've been heard from across the house yelling, agent, what's the magic word to get to a person? I know on United Airlines it's agent, so it's hard to get the human element completely out of processes, no matter what kind of process it is. Also, perhaps some of you might be aware of, or perhaps you've had some personal involvement, hopefully only indirectly, in some kind of a significant system or ERP implementation that didn't go well. The example listed on the slide is for the Air Force Expeditionary Combat Support System. This was a massive ERP project. It involved over 250 supply chain systems, 250,000 users, had a projected cost over $5 billion. It was supposed to take 7 years to complete. Project failed. It was scrapped as a result of several of the common risks that are listed on this slide under the automation risk bullet. The scope was way too large, very complex. The cost was extremely high. They had a firm fixed price contract, and it wasn't really flexible enough to support any changes. They really tried to automate too much of the process at once. There was also issues with poor data accuracy and data dependency on multiple legacy systems that weren't that efficient. Another good example of challenges and risks that exist with system and automation implementations, widely publicized, good old healthcare.gov. Won't talk about that. That's been all over the news, but it's just an example that there is risk. Bottom line, it doesn't matter if it's private sector, public sector, whenever you do a significant new system implementation, there's risks that are there, and you've got to really manage those well to make sure you get a successful result. So this next section is going to get into 7 strategies that'll help you avoid supply chain automation overkill. So, these strategies won't eliminate all the risks, but they can help you, have a much higher probability of achieving a successful result as you look into automation. So, strategy number one, don't use automation to fix a process problem. So, just because you're experiencing a business pain point or a process bottleneck doesn't mean that you can apply a cool process automation tool to that problem and make the pain go away. You've got to dig in and understand your current business process, understand its limitations, also have a vision of what your desired process should look like. Sometimes a relatively simple business process change or modification can eliminate the need for an automation project altogether. Or maybe once you simplify your process a bit more, your business process, it'll be a lot faster or cheaper for you to automate that more simple process. Along the same lines, simple is almost always better. Research has shown that leading companies have fewer key controls than their peer companies. Peer companies with increased numbers of controls or complicated metrics, they typically don't have a better performing process. So another point, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out, that's still valid. You may have a perfectly great business process, but if you've got inaccurate or incorrect data flowing into that process, the results aren't going to be good. If you automate that bad process, you're just going to get bad results faster. Another common issue is wrong or too many reviewers or handlers in a process. It is important to have segregation of duties or proper review or oversight for purchasing or invoicing or certain other processes, but you can go too far. For example, do you really need to go 4 people deep to get a PO approved if you're sending it to your main supplier that you use all the time? Maybe you can maintain acceptable controls and significantly shorten your process cycle time by making some minor adjustments to your review or approval process. Bottom line, solid business processes always come before applying technology to fix the problem. Strategy number 2, match complexity with capability. Or stated another way, match the proper tool to the proper application for that tool. If you run a large global enterprise, you need to manage, coordinate large amounts of information, diverse, complex supply chain. You likely require an advanced enterprise system and software. If you're Apple or HP or Dell or Amazon, large number of suppliers, many SKUs, many distribution channels, you're selling across many different geographies. You would likely be well served by investing in a very sophisticated enterprise scale system. But if you run a small business, small local business, you've got relatively straightforward business model, simple supply chain, you could likely choose a simpler tool. For example, for managing your accounts payable, if you're a small business, maybe you use QuickBooks. You don't need to use SAP's finance module. Richard Gordon, who's a VP at Gartner, recently wrote in a blog, he's a research VP, he wrote in a blog that the simple answer to why we need software is that it manages complexity. The more complex economic activity becomes, the more software is needed to manage and coordinate that activity. So bottom line, you should match the proper tool to the proper application for that tool, proper level of complexity. You don't need a supercomputer with 64 CPUs, 100 terabytes of memory if you're going to check your email. Strategy number 3, get most of the benefits without all of the automation. So a couple of key points here. Automated processes still need to be managed. Even if your supply chain is diverse, it's complex, some automation rather than full automation, meaning maybe replacing all of your staff is usually a better solution. And as discussed before, it's hard to completely eliminate the human element in a complex business process without causing some issues. As you get more automation, the skill set of your staff may change, the required skill set, but usually the need to have at least some skilled humans managing that process doesn't change. Another key point, big bang, very large scope, end-to-end implementations, they're generally expensive. They have long implementation times and they're very high risk. So a modular approach is often beneficial. Perhaps start with a smaller scoped pilot program. This more modular approach can help you minimize cost get faster return on investment, and just gain some confidence with each step. Maybe prove to yourself, prove to your team and your managers that this type of business, automation that you're doing can yield some results, and do that before you continue with a much broader, higher risk scoped implementation. So, I guess the moral is don't bite off or don't automate more than you can chew at one time. Strategy number 4 is, pursue automation for agility. So if you're a manufacturing or a distribution company, you face many challenges in your supply chain. You can improve your forecast accuracy, but forecasts are never going to be perfect. There's always going to be a challenge to have accurate demand forecasting. Today, empowered consumers, we all expect and demand more customization, more service, shorter lead times. We want what we want right now. Inventory risks are out there. If you're a make-to-stock company, you typically may have a longer outbound supply chain with more finished goods inventory. That increases your risk of high inventory-driven costs, obsolete FGI, loss, damage, shrinkage, et cetera. If you're in an industry where the product has a short life cycle, it's even higher risk. If you're a make-to-order company, you've got a shorter outbound supply chain. Maybe you've got less FGI inventory or risk, but you've still got a lot of inventory risk more upstream with raw materials and sub-assemblies. You've got competitive pressures, lean manufacturing principles. You're trying to have more capacity flexibility on your production lines to be responsive. So as you have demand volatility, this means higher risk of production line inefficiencies. So companies continue to try to build more to real-time or actual orders than building to forecasts. To do that, we've got to move faster, be very efficient. If there's any kind of a delay in accessing information from multiple different systems of record or having to rely on manual processes, it's just not that practical. So some kind of process automation is generally required. Without good processes and some automation, there's a real high risk that you may have some product quality or some service quality issues. So what this means is, with all these pressures, and in order to stay competitive, companies need to find the most advanced supply chain methods, tools available to shorten their cycle times and be more responsive. You need to be very agile in your supply chain, and automation is a very key enabler of this. Automation helps, take away the manual processes, simplifies, consolidates communication with your suppliers, your partners, allows for more seamless order placement and confirmation. It helps reduce errors from manual data entry. Your process accuracy is better. You can manage by exception using workflows, which really speeds up the process. And also, you generally can get better real-time visibility to what's going on within your supply chain, your sales orders, purchase orders, inventory, shipments. So bottom line, automation should be pursued with a goal of achieving a shorter supply chain cycle time or shorter cycle times in your processes and get more process agility. Strategy number 5, don't force mature automation on developing regions. So if your supply chain network involves facilities or people that are in developing countries, part of your project planning or your due diligence activity should be, carefully check out, examine the unique characteristics of each country before you launch an automation project in that country. One size doesn't fit all, especially when you're working with developing regions. For example, in some locations, there may not be acceptable internet access. So whether it's wired or wireless, it's not really there. If it is there, maybe the bandwidth or the speed is too slow to support your automation. Maybe the performance is not stable. It's kind of spotty. And if you've got an automation project, for example, that relies on having a fast, stable internet connection, if you try to implement that in that environment, in that country, you're probably going to cause more process bottlenecks and more problems than you actually solve. You'll slow down the whole process. Also, in some cultures, the human element of a business process or a transaction is very critical. Automation can actually damage the trust or relationship with some of your key partners. One example, on a previous project that I worked on, this was several years ago, Western China, there was a key local customs broker that kind of had the power. and he could give you a half-day local customs clearance time out of there or a 1 or 2 day local customs clearance time. It really depended on your relationship and your priority and status as a customer. And even though you could theoretically automate some of the processes and speed up the clearance process, it would take away jobs from his local staff and really hurt your relationship, your status, and your priority. So you may think you're improving your process, but that relationship is really more important than the fast electronic process in that case for speed. Also, in developing markets, labor is often much cheaper than it is in mature markets. In these cases, it may actually be cheaper and more cost-effective to pay for more manual labor, get more people lined up doing work, than paying for the automation itself. So it's always good to do your homework first. Don't force automation technology into a developing region. Strategy number 6, don't over-automate just because you can. Your business shouldn't operate like the old Kevin Costner movie, The Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. In many cases, if you build it, they won't come. It's important to ensure that your technology investments are driven by real business needs of real business users, and they produce actual measurable business benefits and results. You should be able to show an objective positive ROI from your technology investment. Recent survey indicated 50% of ERP users, they were not aware of many of the key features in their company's ERP system, and they were not aware of which specific features their company was even using. So sometimes in these cases, companies might have had a less expensive or a faster implementation if they'd focused their investments more on the features that were prioritized by their users. So bottom line, be careful, don't get caught up in the cool factor or the bells and whistles that you or your technology provider can embed in your automation solution. Make sure that you're investing in capabilities that are actually required and will get used by your business people and have a measurable ROI. Strategy number 7, be creative with your automation. So this strategy has some relationship back, I think it was strategy 1, don't use automation to fix a process problem. Perhaps if you take a creative look at your existing business processes and the root cause of your pain points, you might find that instead of automating these existing processes, you can completely eliminate these existing processes by doing something a little more creative and creatively using automation. American Apparel, they're a good example where they originally set out to automate their in-store manual cycle counting process. They ended up eliminating the process altogether. So they originally thought, hey, let's speed up this in-store cycle counting process so we can have more inventory accuracy, faster visibility, for restocking and such. As they got deeper into the project, they discovered that by creatively using RFID technology, they did ceiling-mounted RFID readers, they could actually get the same results they wanted, and they didn't need any in-store staff to do any cycle counts after that. So the staff was freed up. Instead of walking around counting stuff, they could actually work with customers, sell product, do kind of higher value-added activity. Unilever is another example of a company that was creative in how they applied automation technology to their goals. Back in 2009, they made a strategic shift towards sustainability, and they launched a new vision. They wanted to double their size. They were going to grow, but they were going to reduce their overall impact on the environment. So, these two goals often are opposed to each other. Hard to do them both at the same time. But Unilever used some automation technology and tools to implement what they termed radical transparency to make sure that suppliers were complying with their sustainability goals and their requirements. Transparency meant that the supply chain is visible to Unilever, but it also means that whole supply chain is visible to their farm producers, their suppliers, their customers, the political and pressure groups that look at sustainability stuff. They partnered with a company called SourceMap to share that information across the supply chain. So both of these companies, American Apparel, Unilever, they're both good examples of companies that were thinking a bit outside the box, and they were creative with how they chose to apply automation technology to their business. So in summary, this is a list of the 7 strategies we reviewed to avoid automation overkill. So, one, don't use automation to fix a process problem. Match complexity with capability. Get most of the benefits without all of the automation. Automation for agility. Don't force mature automation on a developing region. Don't over-automate just because you can, and be creative in your automation. So if you were to follow any of these strategies, it'll definitely increase your chance for a successful implementation. Hopefully you can apply more than one of these. Perhaps an additional way to increase your chance of success, you could partner with us if you're working on supply chain automation. I work for Take Supply Chain. We're sponsoring this particular webinar. We've got experience implementing automation solutions in this space, so our focus is trading partner collaboration and automation and process efficiency. We focus with manufacturers and distributors. We've got software services and support. We can deliver solutions on-premise, in the cloud, mobile devices, and we're based in Austin, Texas. So we have a product we call OneSCM. That's the name of our branded solution in the trading partner collab and process automation space. OneSCM, it complements your existing systems. It's not rip and replace. It's ERP agnostic, so it goes well with your existing systems. It also enables broad and rapid trading partner integration regardless of their technology. It's very flexible, and there's a full suite of functional capabilities and processes via the OneSCM portal that you can implement, shown there on the right, and there's others as well. A lot of these are focused on the procure-to-pay area. We've got solutions in other spaces as well. Some of the key benefits of OneSCM: it does provide very agile automation. There's very easy to set up, easy to configure, advanced automated workflows, rules, alerts that support your desired business process. It doesn't force you to live within a narrow or a predefined process that's part of the tool, but you can really configure it to do what you want to do and set up your own rules and processes. It enables what we call true management by exception, where your people only need to get involved in transactional activity if exceptions occur based on the rules that you've set up. It also can provide real-time alerts in a variety of different formats. So if something's going through a workflow, it doesn't match one of your parameters, an alert, it can stop, an alert can go out via mobile device or other alerting mechanism, email, and let someone take a look at that process. But if everything's running smoothly, you don't even have to take a look at it. It enables you to greatly shorten your process cycle times. This type of automation and workflow increases accuracy, frees up your people to focus on higher value-added activities. As I said earlier, very flexible integration. It's not tied to a particular ERP system. It complements your existing systems, whether they're homegrown, legacy systems, off-the-shelf. It works with different back-end solution providers, whether it's SAP, Oracle, JD Edwards, Infor, Epicor, Sage, others. It also can integrate with your external partners in a variety of different ways and formats. On the slide there, XML, EDI, RosettaNet, web portal. They're very flexible in how you can integrate data into the system. So if you're interested in further exploring or asking questions about the return on investment that you might be able to get with some additional supply chain automation or trading partner collaboration, then we would definitely be happy to help you along that journey. So just give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd be glad to talk to you and help. So that's the end of the slide content that we prepared for today. We're now ready for some Q&A. I'm happy to answer questions that you may have either now or via email. I'll hand the microphone back over to Donna, and she can facilitate the questions. Donna?
Thanks, David, and thanks for a great presentation. As I mentioned before, David is now available online for the next 10 minutes or so to answer the questions that you may have. Just submit your question using the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We've also provided our phone number and email addresses on the screen for any questions that you have after the close of our presentation today. And one last reminder, we will have a recorded version of this presentation available on demand via our website at takesupplychain.com by early next week. So let's get to the questions. Okay, here's a good one. David, let's see. How do I know if it is my process that is dysfunctional?
Okay. If I understand the question correctly, perhaps you're saying that you have a problem in your supply chain. How do you know the root cause of the problem? Meaning, how do you know if it's your process that's causing the problem? Maybe it's your people executing the process, maybe technology. An approach that's worked pretty good for me, it's relatively simple, but I often will go through 3 steps. First, document the current process. If it's not already documented, if you can't find an existing document, then you probably do have a process problem because you don't have a process. Or if you don't have a document and you can ask the person who's executing that process, say, hey, can you quickly summarize how the process works and document the process? If that person isn't able to do that, then you've got a process problem because they don't understand the process. Second, if you do have a documented process, it's often good to get someone from outside that process area to read it, to review it, see if they can understand it. If they can't, the process might be unclear or maybe it's a little too complicated, so that's a good test. Finally, another thing is kind of do the day in the life test or the day in the life activity. Pretend that you're an item or a document. You're flowing through whatever the documented process is. Just walk through step by step. Check and see if that documented process is actually being followed and if it makes sense. At the end of kind of going through those kind of activities, you generally have a pretty good idea if you've got a process problem. Hopefully that wasn't too long, but that would be my response.
Okay, let's see, here's the next question. Should I have a thorough business process assessment done before looking at automation?
Generally, yes. It's important, to start by making sure you understand your current business process, their limitations, and do you have a vision for what you want it to look like. However, when you say thorough assessment, I would be careful, or I'd clarify and say it may not be necessary to do a full assessment against your entire end-to-end supply chain unless you're looking at doing a complete overhaul. That can be very expensive, take a lot of time. So typically, we would recommend taking things in phases or modules. Maybe start with your greatest pain point area. You do need to consider adjacent or related activities as well that might get impacted by that process that you're looking at. So we talk about, one up, one down, one on each side. Check out the processes that connect and are impacted, and make sure that any changes you make don't cause issues with any of those adjacent processes. And an example, is like if say you're a manufacturing company and you add a new label to a box coming out of production and it's moving into a kitting area. Well, maybe that new label really helps out the kitting process, but when the box moves from kitting and you've got to ship it, maybe the shipping team is confused and they're not sure which label they're supposed to scan to do a ship confirm. So in that case, you may have made your kitting process more efficient, but you may have caused some problems downstream. So it's important to take a look at related processes and just make sure that whatever you do doesn't have some unforeseen impacts down the road.
All right, here's the next question. Where should I start with automation? Is there one place that is best?
Every business is different, so it really depends on your own unique business situation. As I said earlier, I think maybe start with whatever existing process causes you the most pain, or start with whatever process you think you can get a positive ROI or the highest return on investment if you were to invest and improve it. We see a lot of companies that have not yet automated their procurement or their accounts payable areas. They're still moving around a lot of paper and not taking advantage of electronic documents and workflows. So if you don't have a glaring or obvious pain point in your business to start with, maybe procurement or accounts payable is a good area to take a look at and see if there's some opportunity there as well.
Okay. Here's the next question. My company employs a lot of people who don't want to lose their jobs to automation. How many jobs are typically lost?
Okay, that's a big question. Again, every business is different. You know, it really depends on your unique situation and your company's philosophy. You know, often a successful automation project, it will make processes more efficient. It often does free up people's time. The real question becomes, what's the best way to use that newly available labor bandwidth? You know, yes, companies can choose to do a reduction in workforce, but many companies often will choose to redirect those people to other activities that are more strategic or add more value. You know, in the slides, the case of American Apparel, you know, employees were doing manual cycle counts. So they eliminated that process. You could say, oh, you know, we don't need those folks, but in that case, those people were a lot more valuable actually serving customers and trying to sell products. So most of the time, you know, companies will take a look at that and say, hey, there's a better use for this labor. Let's apply this labor to a higher use. Companies often will realize, too, that their experienced employees, you know, they can move them around and they'll come up to speed real quickly versus if you take a new person off the street, put them into that company, it'll take them months to come up to speed sometimes. So, you know, the answer does depend, but in a lot of cases, you know, resources just get deployed to higher value-added activities.
Okay, let's check the next question. Here's a good one. How long is it before you can really trust automated processes over manual ones?
You know, it depends, again, depends on the complexity of your process. Also depends on how thorough you were in testing the new process before going live. Regardless of how much testing you do before you go live, there's always some time after go live that you need to be real careful and watch the new process, make sure it performs well and does what you expect. It's really hard to get everything right during testing. It's hard to replicate the volume or intensity of a live system or environment. We at Take, we have a standard project methodology that we follow. We believe it helps, you know, create a high probability of success, but it still can be anywhere from a few days to a few months after you go live to really trust it, and it depends on the complexity and the scope of what you're implementing.
Okay, and it looks like we have time for one more question. So the last question for today's session, and again, if you have additional follow-ups, please use the information on the screen. At my old company, we implemented automation, and it was very expensive to modify. How much cheaper is it today?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what process you automated and what tool you use and how long ago it was to make a kind of a comparison of then versus now. But the short answer is that it's likely cheaper today. You know, I can't speak for all the new technology that's out there on the market, but I know, you know, our workflow automation tool provides a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility. There's a graphical user interface. There's an admin tool that customers actually use themselves to make modifications to their own workflows, their own rules, their configurations. So it allows you to easily set up different workflows for different trading partners or set up different workflows or processes that are triggered by specific data elements in a document or in a process. So as part of our implementation services, we usually train a super user or two at the customer site, and it's that person who actually going forward can make those types of changes for themselves in the process. So that makes it, you know, pretty cheap and pretty affordable. You don't have to go out and pay someone to modify it, but you can make some of those adjustments yourself in the workflow tool.